Hey everyone, my name is Alessio Capoletti, and I am a New Orleans filmmaker by way of New York City, originally from Providence, Rhode Island. I'd like to thank Louisiana Film Channel and everybody involved for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be here and to discuss with you my process of making movies and some of my anecdotes. So I'm very grateful to be here with you, and I hope you enjoy some of my movies that are up on the channel. So let's get started. Is there a particular event or time you recognize that filmmaking was not just a hobby, but that it would be your life and your living? I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I always knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I had been watching movies since I was a little kid. I would fall asleep with Peanuts Gang, Snoopy on the TV, Disney Channel. They used to play the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea late at night, and I'd fall asleep watching that, or sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and it would be on. So I always kind of knew. I was interested in acting at a super young age, did that all throughout high school, was also involved in spoken word poetry throughout high school, and had just started directing when I was in high school, thanks to Miss Saros, my film studies teacher and film production teacher. I think the youngest age that I penned or started to pen a sequel to a film was when I was like 12 years old, 13 years old, and it was a sequel to Children of the Corn. So yeah. So I always kind of knew. When I left high school, I went to American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City and was studying as an actor there. And then while studying as an actor, I realized how much it was enriching me as a director, and that's probably where I really made my decision. Is it harder to get started or to keep going? What particular thing did you have to conquer to do either? I think both are challenging. Getting started is challenging because being a filmmaker is a totally different lifestyle than almost any other lifestyle. I think the only comparison really could be an entrepreneur. Everything is self-motivated. So when you come out of high school and you come out of college and you're used to being a part of a schedule, right? Your days are blocked out pretty rigorously in a very regimented way. When you leave and now you're just in the world, there's no one really to tell you what to do. And then on top of that, the process of getting a job in the film industry is not like you just sign up and then boom, you're locked a job and that job continues in perpetuity forever. You're jumping from job to job. You're usually doing jobs to support yourself, that way you can get into another job in the film industry you like. So I would say that getting started, having the self-discipline is definitely a challenge, for most people, for some people. I would also say that, I would say getting started is a challenge for most people. But once you get into it and you get used to it, it becomes second nature. You almost couldn't see yourself doing anything else. You couldn't go back to a 9-to-5. I think to remain in the industry and to keep going is only challenging because you have life throw a lot of things at you. On your rise up to being a filmmaker, you have life throw a lot of things at you. And you're expected to deal with those life circumstances while also dealing in a career that at times can be unstable and challenging. And I think that that's why you see a lot of people also just give up. For most of the filmmakers I came up with, a lot of them, 99.9% of them quit. And they were super talented. Talent wasn't the issue. What the issue was stamina. Life stamina. And that can be tough for anybody. So the people who are still here, who really want to be here, are people who really, really, really couldn't see themselves doing anything else. Could not see anything else making them happy. Made numerous sacrifices to be here. And it takes a particular kind of person to have that wherewithal. That's not saying that's right or wrong. It's just saying to be a filmmaker, it takes a very particular kind of person. What particular thing did you have to conquer to do either? Discipline, self-discipline was a big part. Positive thinking. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You're going to have so many people shut doors in your face for so long. I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're in school and you get picked up right away. But you have to be able to believe in yourself and only care about your validation of yourself versus anybody else. Because if you listen to other people, you'll be out of the game within the first 6 months. You have to have this really unbreakable, even in the worst of the worst conditions, the worst of the worst period in your life, you have to have this unbreakable, I'm not quitting. Even if it's out of just sheer anger. Just sheer, I'm going to prove it to everybody. I'm not quitting. So I had to learn that. And I built that a lot. I would say that was the most major thing I had to learn. I'm still trying to learn time management a bit, but I would say that that's the most major thing that I had to learn. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to have a career creating film? I mean, there's so much advice. I would say study anything that you could get your hands on. That's a big part that's going to put you ahead of the game. Read books. You know, yeah, watching a YouTube movie is great. Subscribing to some cool YouTube channels are great. But a lot of us who are in the industry who are coming from a period slightly before that can tell you that there's a lot of stuff on there that's super misleading. That's just the Spark Notes version of making movies. I still stand by reading books, you know, books on directing, books on acting techniques, books on cinematography, books on every department. Even if you're not in those departments, you should know every single department. You should be able to speak their language, and you should be able to do their job at a basic level. That is being a director. I would also say studying books on photographic composition. That way you can understand the psychological and emotional connotations of photographic composition. Studying color theory. Super important. Study art. Read books on art. My favorite artist is Jean-Michel Basquiat. You look at his work and say, how do you use that in making movies? You know, I can look at his paintings and it makes me feel something, and I say, what would this painting look like if this was translated into a scene, into a photographic frame? You know, study art, study architecture. That doesn't mean you have to go to school for it, but read books on it. Books on interior design that can help you speak with your production designer. Think outside the box. Books on music. Listen to all different kinds of music. Listen to opera, listen to hip hop, listen to electronica, listen to world music. So that would be my first number one piece of advice. Study, 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 study. My second piece of advice is to also study managerial books. Books like Machiavelli's The Prince. Books like The Five Rings. These are books that are tried and true books about leadership, right? I'd say that, you know. What's Machiavelli's Prince about? And this is a really good book for you to read. It's about Machiavelli, who is advising an incoming prince, and he's advising him based on all the princes that came before him and all the kings in history that Machiavelli studied of what they did right and what they did wrong. And in the book, he is advising this prince on how to rule not even a region, a piece of land that is culturally somewhat united but divided up territorially and being occupied by foreign occupiers. So there's so much wisdom in that, and how that relates to the business industry and the film industry. So I'd say study that, study entertainment law, study. What was the most important lesson you had to learn that has had a positive effect on your film? How did that lesson happen? I've learned a lot of lessons throughout filmmaking. One of the lessons, let me just say, is compartmentalization. There's a lot of things that can happen to you during a film. Case in point, Louisiana Film Channel picked up my film, The Date. And The Date is a really interesting film for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons being is that the week before I shot The Date, my mother died. And then the night of the shoot, a few hours before the shoot, my aunt died. So what do? You have to continue with the shoot because there's money on the line and because you're responsible to people. You have to become bigger than yourself. You have to come up out of yourself. And that's a big part of being a director, and that's a huge lesson that I learned in filmmaking. It's about so much more than you. You're the last thing it's about, even when you're a director. I would say for Broken Crayons, it was learning to adapt. We came on set, first day of shooting, we had equipment malfunctions, we had all sorts of issues come up because of weather patterns. Just a quick background on Broken Crayons. It's a film that was shot on Super 16mm and Pro 8mm. We had no video taps in the cameras. We were using light meters and tape measures for focus. It was an all-children cast who had never acted before. It was a period piece. It was all exteriors. And it is shot to take place over the course of one day, so you watch the daylight change in real time to twilight. And there was a war scene. And the sequence that we shot at twilight was 10 minutes. Yeah. So, in that shoot, I had to learn how to adapt. And I learned that the more you do in pre-production, the better you off in production. And we did a lot in pre-production, and that's what saved us in production. Just because you do a lot of pre-production doesn't mean production is going to go smoothly. What it means is that when things go wrong, if they go wrong, you are able to improvise easily. You have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. That's what it's about. Because when you step into production, it can be like stepping into a trench in a war zone. So you gotta really keep your head about you. You gotta be very unemotional. What else we got? You are a collaborator. I am. How have you discovered members of your team, and how do you keep the relationship with them strong? I discover members for my team all over the place. Sometimes it's based on referral. Sometimes referrals don't work out so well, right? You have a person you really trust saying you got to work with this person. They look great on paper, you bring them on set, it's just not their day, or they just don't work well in the chemistry of everybody else, right? But I would say usually referrals are the best way. I've done some cold hires. Recently for my film Wretched Earth, I shot 2 films last year. I shot And That's That, and then which is a super dark comedy in post-production, and then I also shot Wretched Earth, which is a pretty intense period piece. So I had met how I had met my composer, whose name is Kamal Yusuf. I was on Instagram 2 years ago, and I see one of his improv piano pieces just pop up on my newsfeed. So I click it. And I was so blown away by it. I go to his Instagram page, click on a couple more pieces, and again I'm blown away. I go down the page and I hit this song. This song moved me so deeply. I wrote to him right away and I said, I know you don't know me. I'm working as a filmmaker. I'm a writer-director. I really want to collaborate with you. I don't even know what on, but something. And so he was really taken back and impressed by what I said. And then within the next year, coronavirus hit. And I had just penned Wretched Earth at the very beginning, right before coronavirus. And when I penned it, I knew I had no music in mind, but I knew that song I heard had to be the ending song. And it was almost as if that song wrote the script itself. That and the title, because I came up with the title before I even came up with the story. Sometimes that's how it works for me. But that's how I met my composer now, who also composes for the Philharmonic in London and teaches at Royal Academy. You are here at the Louisiana Film Channel's Movie of the Week. Yes, I am. You are here because of your work and how you do it. Oh yeah. What are personal attributes that make for a good filmmaker, and what do you do to foster them? Man, if I knew that these questions were going to be this deep, I would have come with my life preserver. I mean, these questions are excellent so far. What question am I on? 6? Oh man. What makes for a good filmmaker? Well, if we're talking about a director, it's being a bona fide servant. That's what a director is. You have to be humble and a bona fide servant, but you also have to be able on a dime to assert your authority. You shouldn't assert your authority unless you absolutely have to. You are there to nurture the best out of all your collaborators. They're not your employees. They're not underlings. They are your collaborators. They are your equals. And the only reason why you have some sort of veto power is because structurally that's what keeps things from being either total anarchy or from you having to spend so much time creating a democracy on set. Outside of that, your collaborators are equals. So you're a bona fide servant. You are there to serve them, to nurture them, to do your best for them under the most dire circumstances. Everybody else can be exhausted and be low morale. You cannot. You have to be focused. You have to be strong. So that makes for a good filmmaker. Being educated, and what I mean by educated is just self-educated. Be curious. Be thirsty for knowledge. Don't think you know it all. Constantly grow and learn. That's really important. Be a good listener. Listen to your people. Listen to what they have to say. Take it into account collaboratively. I'll give you just a quick analogy, 2 analogies. So, I do this thing on set where I don't generally eat with the crew. So I was working on a set one time, and I remember I had this key grip come up to me, and he goes, "So Alessio, I see you're not eating with us, so what is it? Do you think you're better than us?" And I told this key grip point blank, I said, "I don't think I'm better than you." I said, "I don't eat with you because I want my people to have the best food when it's best, and that's when it's hot. I'd rather have them first pick of the best food, and then I eat what's left over." That changed the whole dynamic between me and the crew after that. That's a true statement. The director is the first person on set, the last one to leave. The director is the first one to blame and really should be the last one to praise. You're a bona fide servant. Your people come first. A good director puts crew safety and an investor's return on investment first, and they put making a great film second. Now, some people would say, well, isn't making a great film also what allows an investor to get their return on investment? Yes and no. What I'm saying is that a director shouldn't be on set aiming to get shots that are going to put them behind schedule because they're shots that they really want and not necessarily what's going to matter in the end for the film. They should be aiming to come in under budget and ahead of schedule. Tied at number 1 with that is crew safety. Casting crew safety and comfort. As much comfort as you can give, depending on your budget, depending on circumstances. That, I think, makes a really great a really great director. And you're asking, how do I foster them? I foster them just because that's the way I live. A good director also tries hard not to come from a place of judgment, but a place of empathy. Judgment doesn't yield anything creative. It yields political discord, right? That's what judgment does. Empathy is how you are creative. You can empathize with somebody. You can empathize with a character. When I wanted to devote my life to making movies, my first decision was New York or LA. How does where you live influence how and what you make, and how do you think Louisiana currently affects your work and process? So, I came out of New York, and being a New York filmmaker is, to me, it's a cut above the rest. Just like the age-old saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I hold New York, and especially Brooklyn, where I lived for a number of years, very, very, very dear to my heart. I will always be a New Yorker. I was there for 8 years. I was there during the housing crisis. That was a very particular and special time to be a New Yorker and to survive in New York. Being in New York and being a filmmaker in New York and going to school in New York, it sets in you a work ethic that is like almost nobody can compete with. I went to a conservatory that told me that if I was getting more than 4 hours of sleep a night, I wasn't working hard enough. Do I still live by that? No, I don't, and I don't promote other people living by that, but it has allowed me to work crazy hours. Crazy. Without needing break, without needing food. When I was on Wretched Earth, I remember there was a day that I went 15 hours without drinking water or eating food because there was just no time. I was too busy. Now you might say, yeah, that's super unhealthy. You should have had water and had food. Absolutely, you're 100% right. But the point that I'm making is that being a New York filmmaker, it is not about luxury. It is not about meal times, especially when you're starting out. It's not about, can we do everything in a 10-hour day? You're doing whatever it takes to get it done. Now, if you have directors taking advantage of you for that, that's a problem. You don't want anybody taking advantage, but being a New York filmmaker, there aren't complaints. You're shooting in the middle of dead winter. You're shooting in a city where people tell you to go expletive yourself if you even throw a smile at them. And then there's a camaraderie about being in New York and being in that place. So it just sets a different work ethic. And it's made me the director I am today to be able to operate at top capacity under the most adverse conditions. It creates wartime directors. That's what it does. And it creates people who are absolutely hungry for success. Because if you're not in New York, you get eaten. You get eaten immediately. There's no time for nonsense on set. You have to be really good at what you do. You can't make mistakes or you're out. New York instilled in me honor. Honor. You are here in this city starving to death just to be able to create. You know, it's the same reason why do people go to Broadway and dress in suits? Because you're giving respect to people who are starving to death and working 3 jobs to go home to a shoebox apartment filled with cockroaches just to come here to this stage instead of sleeping to be able to perform for you at top capacity and then to go back. That's honor. As a filmmaker from New York, it taught me you are representing yourself. You're representing your family, you're representing your city, your town, and you're representing all the people who can't be here in a privileged position to create. Some of those people, life unfortunately pushed them in different directions, others are dead. So you need to hold your head up and you need to act at all times with absolute integrity and honor. Because you're not just representing yourself, you're representing so much more. Being in New Orleans, I met some of my best collaborators here. Kai White, who I work with, who's an amazing producer, predominantly works as a line producer with us and works in distribution, exhibition platforms, phenomenal. Elaine Huntington is one of our top creative producers. She can do everything and anything. So, I mean, it could be creative producing, advising on co-productions, grants, tax credits. She's also a phenomenal actress. I also met Bradley Greer, who is one of the best colorists in the world, Hollywood colorist. He has changed my whole entire life in terms of how I deal with color grading and editing, because that's also what I do as a day job. And he was so generous with his time and his tutelage. He is also a phenomenal writer and a phenomenal director. I met some amazing people here, and I met people willing to do things for you and ask nothing in return. And New Orleans also taught me how to save my life from it being totally eaten by work and eaten by passion and eaten by obsession and eaten by ambition. Because that can happen. What makes a great film for you? Are there certain qualities that make a film better for you? There's so much, right? I mean, actors who are totally losing themselves in the performance, changing their physicality, their voice, everything to disappear into the character. I'll talk more about that later. Directors who really understand shot composition, photographic composition. DPs who don't overlight. There's a difference. There's two different ways of shooting. One is lighting, what's called lighting for the neg, and the other one is called lighting for post. Lighting for the neg is when you're really dialing into your color and lighting on set, like really dialing into it, and in a way not leaving a ton of room for improvisation. This is especially true in exposures. Lighting for post is when you overlight a bit to create more latitude. I though think that sometimes it gets out of control, and then because the light isn't shaped the right way, you get flat lighting. It's just a whole other long diatribe to get into. But directors and DPs who really understand photographic composition, color theory, production designers who are also really utilizing that in a cohesive grammatic language, right? If we're going to use close-ups, we only use them at these times, and we only use these kind of close-ups for this character. Dialing into saying, I'm not just doing a shot because it looks cool, I'm creating a very cohesive cinematic grammar. And that involves restriction. That involves bringing your editor into pre-production early and saying, okay guys, when are you only planning to use wide shots? Which lenses are those wide shots going to be on? Okay, do you switch the wide shots being on a different lens at some point? Okay, why is that? Where is that? Cohesive, right? Restrict yourself. Only use close-ups at certain times, etc., etc., etc. And that is partly based on the editor as well. So I would say that. I would also say if nothing else, just seeing a team really put their soul into that project. That doesn't mean they have to work themselves to death. That means that they cared so much about it. Sometimes you have teams of people who kind of do a project, but they're daydreaming about a bigger project that they'll put more effort into. Those people don't last very long. But it is quite often that happens. Every project you should be putting in 110%, and that's what makes a great film for me. What films have been the most inspiring or influential to you, and why? God, there are so many. My favorite film of all time is La Dolce Vita by Fellini, in part because Fellini does films that are bittersweet. Fellini's films always end like this. I kid you not. This is like 90% of his films. I'm going to break it down for you. Ready? This is how a Fellini film ends. That's what Fellini does every time to the audience. Whether it's Nights of Cabiria, La Dolce Vita, he presents a whole situation to you that is both funny, but funny also in its tragedy, in its absolute absurdity, in its irony. And then at the end, when you want closure, Fellini does this. That's how Fellini felt about life. You know? My father has this saying, I don't know if he originated this saying or if he picked it up from somewhere. He inscribed this saying in a book of Pirandello's plays that he gave to my mother. And the saying went like this: the greatest tragedy does not bring us to tears. It brings us to laughter. And God, if that isn't true with Fellini's work, with the Coen brothers, they do that all the time. They take the darkest material and horrify the audience, and then horrify you so much you have to laugh about it. Ingmar Bergman was another big influence, and is another big influence, although he is not very funny in his work. But I just love dearly how great of a director and a writer he is with the actors and the shot. Because usually you have three different kinds of directors. You have an actor's director, a shot director, and a combination of the two. The combination of the two is what I strive for and what I am, but it's usually rare. You have one or the other. Bergman was both. I like him a lot. Tarkovsky, Scorsese's early work like After Hours, Taxi Driver, Mean Streets, particularly his work when he was under the influence of things. Just very original, very daring. He was just so daring. But there's just so many. Frank Capra, John Ford, it's just Tarkovsky, Kurosawa, Otsu. It's a lot. I would say some of the first films that made me want to be a filmmaker were, and this is kind of going to sound funny, but we had the Sundance Channel when I was a kid, and they just had films that, like, I would watch great films on HBO, like Steven Spielberg, right? And then you go to the Sundance Channel, and it was just a whole other world. Drugstore Cowboy. Such a good movie. Gus Van Sant. Oh my god. Trainspotting. Danny Boyle. Both about drugs. Kids by Larry Clark was a huge one for me that really expressed to me stuff that I was seeing growing up. Stuff that spoke to my generation, you know? What else we got here? Are there common qualities in cinema today that you dislike? Is there something you try to subvert, avoid, or rebel against in your work? A lack of decisiveness and precision in filmmaking, right? It's one thing to be technically precise. Okay? Anybody can be a technician if they're a filmmaker long enough, and if you have enough money, you can hire the best technicians. But technicians that are artists, that's a whole different ball of wax. Seeing films that are precise and cohesive in their visual approach, the acting as it is acted and directed is full of beats that are colorful. I mean, it sounds so elitist for me to say, but older films really had it down. You had the best of both worlds, of all worlds. You had precise technicians, including artistry, and you had actors who it was just not enough to be themselves on screen. I think that there is a difference between what's called celebritization and characterization. Celebritization is when you bring an actor in a film to just play themselves because who they are as a person is marketable, their face is marketable, but they're never asked to really change anything about themselves to become the character. Characterization nowadays is rare. It wasn't rare, let's say, 40 years ago, but it's become increasingly rare, and characterization is really when actors and directors are putting in the work for that actor to change themselves to become a particular character. And that's what I really enjoy and look for, because that's the kind of director I am, that's kind of the kind of acting coach I am. I was known as an acting coach up north. I do some of it down here as well. More on that later. Is there something you try to subvert, avoid, or rebel against in your work? The only thing that I would say that I try to rebel against is making the same film twice. Sometimes similar themes show up in my films, and after the past couple films I've done, I've been more now trying to avoid those themes, or avoid repeating themes. But I don't like making the same film twice, and I don't like operating in the same genre twice. If I have a chance to shoot in totally different aspect ratios, I will. If I have a chance to shoot on totally different cameras, I will. Different lenses, different... we shot Wretched Earth in 239 and created a special thing in post-production where we are going out to infrared black and white, which is rarely, if ever, been done for narrative. And... you know, that's a period piece shot it a particular way. Then I did And That's That, and That's That was shot in a studio, because Wretched Earth is all on location, exteriors. And That's That was shot in a studio, in color, with a set, all interior. So, and it was 185. So I like to change things. I don't like to stay in the same place. If I make a film and people are like, oh man, I really love that film, and I'm like, that's great. That's the last time you're going to see a film like that from me. Here we go. Here's another one. I don't have any interest in being an auteur at all. I don't have any interest in leaving my signature on a film. My interest almost solely lies in being a chameleon. I want someone to watch a film of mine and go, wow, that's amazing, and then watch another film and go, wow, that was amazing. Who is that? And somebody goes, that's Alessio again, and then go, oh my god, I couldn't even tell. That's my interest. I don't like staying comfortable as a filmmaker. We are all here presumably or partially because we love cinema. How did your love for movies get sparked, and what can we as a community do to help others discover a similar pleasure? So I don't think that there's much you can do to help other people discover movies at this point, because screens are rampant, right? You got YouTube movies, you got TikTok, you got Hulu, you got Netflix, you got all these different places for media. I think instilling an appreciation of submitting fully when watching a movie we could help instill. In the old days, you would go to a movie theater and you wouldn't even dare get up and try to leave the theater. You'd hopefully be going to the bathroom beforehand, unless you're sitting in the wings and maybe can kind of slip out without too much of a ruckus. It was an event. It was so communal, and there was an adrenaline rush when you went to the movies. It's not like today. You walk into a movie theater, everybody's kind of sitting and moving in their chairs. You might be with a loved one or on a date. You're excited, and then at the same time you're excited for this movie. Nobody knows what to expect. Nobody knows what to expect from the rest of the audience. Nobody knows what to expect from each other, from the film. And then the lights go down, and it's like being at a concert. The lights go down, and your heart rate increases a bit, and you're like, oh man, here it goes. And then it starts with the advertisements, right? The trailers. Oh, that looks really cool. Oh, another Schwarzenegger movie. I want to see a sequel to that. And you can't leave. You can't pause the film. I don't know. This is a later question you bring up about screens, but I think we should instill people appreciating the moment. Appreciate the moment. Stop swiping left or right on your cell phone when you're in conversations with people at a table. Enjoy people while you have them. Enjoy what's in front of you while you have it. You know, that's what I think. How did my love of movies get sparked? I was introduced to it by my parents, really. My parents were both intellectuals, activists, artists. I got very lucky. My dad was huge into poetry and literature and films, and he pushed me in that direction, and my mother was an actress. I'll tell you a really funny story about my mother. So my mother went to audition at the same school I went to, American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She goes into her audition, and she does a very famous monologue from the play Our Town. So she does this monologue, gets through it, finishes it. The people who were the judges for her entrance audition stop her before she leaves, and she goes, "I am so sorry." She goes, "That monologue was so amazing. Would you mind doing it again for us? We have somebody right outside who would really love to hear it." So my mother goes, "Absolutely." My mother goes and preps. They bring in this old woman who's got a cane, walk her over to her chair. And my mother comes out, does monologue, finishes. This old woman starts crying, and she gets up and moves to embrace my mother. And she kisses my mother on the cheek, and she goes, "My God, that was so amazing. That's exactly how I did it." And my mother goes, "What do you mean that's how you did it?" And she goes, "That's how I did it when I first premiered that part." And my mother goes, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." And the woman goes, "I'm Lillian Gish. I premiered that part on Broadway." My mother had no idea who Lillian Gish was. God bless her. But that's the kind of parents I had and have. And they introduced me to so many beautiful things. Generally speaking, when we want to learn about a film, we talk to the director, but those that make films know how much they really are collaborations, yes. What makes a fruitful collaboration, and what do you do to enhance the collaborative process? Such a huge question. First of all, I try to give all my people ownership, right? Over the film. As soon as the film leaves the writer's hands and goes into the director's hands, it is no longer owned by one person. The director almost is sort of like this lobby where now everybody involved with the director has ownership over the film, because it's that collaborative. I always tell directors, if you want to be a tyrant, if you want all the glory, then you should become a painter. Become a painter. So much easier. Okay? But being a director, you're a collaborator. And what I try to do, I try to bring my collaborators on very early. I try to bring my collaborators on during the script stage. And then as early as pre-production, I try to bring my people in from post. So my editor, post sound if I already have it, my colorist. The colorist has to be on. I don't know why a lot of people don't do this. The colorist has to be on in pre-production. Do not bring a film like everybody does to a colorist after production, expecting them to get you a look that they weren't originally in on the conversation, nor advised your production designer how to set up that look for color. Colorists should be involved in the early conversations with the makeup department, the production designer, the cinematographer, etc., etc., etc. So I just think keeping people invested in the film is about letting them know that it's their film. You know, and I think in a perfect world, or hopefully a world that I'm going to try to build, I think that a lot of the collaborators should be collecting points off the back end. Really. You know. It is said that there are only 6 stories, maybe 12. It's all been done before and we have seen it all. What do you do to keep it fresh? Is there anything that you can do to subvert the process to keep it original? First of all, I don't agree with the idea that there's only 12 stories. It's all been told before. And that doesn't even really matter, does it? That's like, I've had friends of mine who are musicians go, you play a chord and they go, oh, the Beatles already wrote that. So what? Right? I mean, if we try to live in that paradigm, I mean, nothing's original. Go back to cave paintings, nothing's original. I don't think of things that way. I mean, yeah, you try to avoid tropes, you try to reinvent cliches, but it's all about how you tell a story. It's all about how you tell it, right? I mean, yeah, every story has a good guy or a bad guy. Hopefully every story has some kind of arc. Sometimes it doesn't. You have like a circular arc or a non-plot or whatever, which is also kind of cool. What I do, and what I tell a lot of people to do, is I usually carry around a notebook with me, an idea notebook. And whatever ideas come to mind, I write them down. People have asked me, have you ever gotten writer's block? And I said, no. And they said, well, how's that possible? I said, because I've trained my mind not to have that problem. Because I don't judge what comes out of my head, I just write it down. And then what happens when you start to work in that way is that your mind just starts producing good ideas. Because it knows that you are not going to judge the ideas that come out. And the mind then almost is not skittish to give you ideas. If you train your mind to always judge what it gives you, then it's going to stop giving you things because you're always going to think that what it gives you is bad. What I tell a lot of writers is just write. Revise the next day. Revise in the morning. Just write. So I carry around this notebook with me. I have like 8 notebooks filled up to the brim with ideas, dialogue ideas, cinematography ideas, plot ideas, marketing ideas. And then I have like a 250-page document on my computer of more ideas. And I took 6 months to break up each of the ideas and then add tags. That way, if ever I get in a bind and I'm like, 2-person dialogue, eerie, insulting, profanity, type in a tag and boom, 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 get all these hits. It's being preemptive. Preemptive against any kind of writer's block. And also trust that no matter how complex a story is I'm telling, I always trust myself and say the answer is coming to me. It's all about mindset. It's all about mindset. Oh, and another thing of how to keep it original, just while we're on that topic. Don't use films as your inspiration. They're in your medium. It's nice to enjoy them, but read books, look at paintings, listen to music, look at architecture, and let that influence a story. The point is, you don't want to use always your same medium as a reference, because then you're recycling what's already been done. It's far easier to do that. But when you go to a different medium, it's much easier to create something unique from that different medium into your medium. For example, like me and my composer in London that I earlier told you about, we had a conversation and we did not talk really in technical terms, musical terms. We were talking in terms of what does silence sound like? Or we might look at a painting and go, what does that painting sound like? My composer asked me, he goes, does the music have color? Or is the music monochromatic or black and white? I mean, think about that. What does music with color sound like versus music that lacks color? Is it stark? Is there no transition? Maybe there is transition because you can go from white into gray into black. But what does that, it's still a very stark transition. What does that transition sound like? Versus yellow into purple. Talk in those terms. We get noticed because of our successes, but we create them on the back of our failures. Whoever wrote these questions is brilliant. I would like to meet this person and just shake their hand, because these questions are really, really good. I really enjoy this. Let me say that again. We get noticed because of our successes, but we create them on the back of our failures. We can learn best from the experiences where it doesn't work, yet we still only discuss the success, not the failure. What failures of your own have you been able to learn from? How did they change you and your process? I don't feel like I've had cinematic failures. I just don't look at life like that. I really don't. I think that's a very poor way to look at things. I think learning from a challenge, like certain things that might happen on set, but even on set, I mean, I'm thinking of the sets I've been on and thinking how prepared we were going in and saying, was there anything that I could have done better? No. I did the absolute best that I could do. The absolute. Now, if we're talking about life, what have I learned from life is, don't allow your ambitions and passions to become more important than life and people. It's a big mistake a lot of filmmakers make. You know, you see a lot of filmmakers who can end up in a lonely place, right? And some people wonder, well, how does this happen? It's pretty easy, actually. If all you do is work, and all you do is build your ambitions and build your empire, what other time is there? If you allow stresses to affect your interpersonal relations because you work in a high stress field, what do you think happens? The key is, it's balance. You have to care about filmmaking and care about your ambitions, but not so much, right? You have to also care about relaxing, but not so much. You have to care about all the people in your life and your loved ones, but you can't care about them so much that you're also never doing what you want to do. It's all balance. So the best thing that I can say that I have learned and am still working on and learning from challenges in my career is balance. Balance being a king and building that empire with also enjoying life. It's a big thing. There is nothing more important really than life, not even film. It all starts with the script. Maybe not, but when do you know a script is ready to shoot? What is your process of getting it there? You know, I've heard people say the script is never ever finished. That's not true. I feel like I know exactly when my scripts are finished. But that's not the same answer to this question. Let me answer this question in this way. Your script is finished when you feel that it's ready to give to investors and when they are willing to give you money for it. That's when it's finished. How do you get it to that place? I like to do maybe 1 or 2 drafts. Once those 1 or 2 drafts are done, I create a small test audience. Not really small, it's a test audience. It's actually a pretty large test audience, but it's more of a microcosm because I handpick all different people from all different walks of life. I get them to all do a questionnaire, and then if there are particular things that multiple people comment on, I know, okay, I probably have to change those things because multiple people have commented on them. And then after that draft is done, based on that criticism, if I feel comfortable with the script at that point, I hand it to an investor. Once it gets financing, yes, You're working with actors, the DP, all different things. Things are still going to flux and change, more than likely. But every script that I've worked on that has been made, I look back at the script and go, the script was finished. It was done. That was it. You know? Yeah, so that's my feeling on that. The other thing I'll just say about the process of getting it there is I do a lot of pre-screenwriting work. I do a lot of prep work. I'll do character interviews, character bios. I do step outlines, scene outlines. I will write in my scene outline first what the arc of the scene is, or if I don't know and find it later, I put it at the bottom of each scene's outline, the arc, the character arc, and the plot arc. I don't generally write freeform, with the exception of short films. My feature films are not freeform, but the short films I've done have sometimes been freeform, and they work out great. Wretched Earth, I did 2 drafts of, and it got financing. And that's that. I think it was 4 drafts financing. Then I have other films where I do 20 or 30, like Par La Paz, which has gotten developmental financing, was probably about 30 drafts. You know. Several directors have told me that most of directing is actually casting. Regardless of whether that is true, some actors have it, and sometimes they need something to make it pop. You've spotted that it and captured it. What is it, and how do you find it? Well, funny story. If we're talking about Broken Crayons, those actors had never acted before I trained them. So I don't believe that great directing is casting. I believe great directing is a director who can take anybody off the street and get a great performance from them. Are there a lot of directors who know how to do that? No. I work as an acting coach, so I've studied every acting technique in the world. And on Broken Crayons, we trained those actors from scratch. I feel like it's kind of like the easy way out and lazy to just cast somebody who naturally is the part. It's like documentary almost. It's more interesting to me to go on a journey with the actor and to make them into that part. As an acting coach, I run a conservatory alternative which runs 2 years, traditional apprentice style. Usually 2 students per class, 4-hour classes, required reading, homework, all this stuff. And I teach every functional acting technique in the world over 2 years. I teach the inside-out techniques and the outside-in techniques, but the whole basis is what I call 5 levels of characterizing. And 5 levels of characterizing allow you to become the character to a point where you're not recognizable to yourself and you're not recognizable to the audience, right? Full character immersion. So it's changing your psychological process, your emotional process, and your intellect, right? It's changing your physicality, right? How you hold your body, how you hold your weight, your postures, how you physicalize emotions, right? The way I physicalize emotions versus how you physicalize emotions are probably 2 different things, because our physicalities foundationally are different. Changing your voice. So when you hear an actor do an accent, you're like, oh, that actor's doing a British accent, but they still sound like themselves. That's because they didn't change the foundation of their voice. They need to change their pitch, their timbre, where they're resonating from, their rhythm of speech. Do they overly accent vowels or consonants? Once you change the foundational parts of your voice and then you put an accent on it, you're not going to sound like anybody. You're not going to sound like yourself. You're going to sound like everybody else or somebody else. The The fourth level is costuming, right? What kind of costuming are you wearing? Color, fabric, fit, style. How does that make you feel more like the character? How does that influence emotions to come up for you? How does it trigger them? And then the fifth level of characterizing is what Lecoq called the mobile mask, the face. Change a person's eyebrow line. Add facial hair, remove facial hair. Do they wear glasses? Change their hairstyle. And then when you have a little bit more money, change their face. Add prosthesis. The whole point of acting, where it started, was not to be yourself. Actors looking like themselves on screen and stage started really as a marketing thing. You had a couple good-looking actors. You had men who'd come into the audience paying to see a good-looking female actor on stage. It was marketing. But real acting started as a religious experience. It was spiritual. It was tribal members dressing in masks and channeling a particular deity to be able to give wisdom to the rest of the community. The kind of acting I deal in is that I want people to explore and become the character. I don't want them to be themselves. What else we got here? If my phone would stop acting up. So just to finalize that answer to your question, I don't believe that you find it. I don't believe that you find it. I believe that you nurture it in your actors. The structure of business. Is the film business fair? Why or why not? How do you make the apparatus work for you? The film business, if we're talking about somebody like me, I am in a very privileged position. And I think for people similar to me in a privileged position, the film industry is as fair as you are positive. If you're a positive person and you work hard, you're going to get very far. If you're a negative person, you're just going to manifest that into reality. Work, be passionate, enjoy what you do, you'll make your dreams happen. They'll just happen easily, naturally. Now, if you're not in a privileged position and you have a lot against you, yes, can you still make it? Absolutely, it happens all the time. But I think that it's our duty, those of us who are of privilege, to aid people who are less privileged in a way that they advise us to. I think that we need more females in high positions in the film industry. I think that we need more LGBTQ. I think we need more LGBTQ-driven stories. I think we need more people of color. I think we need all different ethnicities of people telling stories and taking up high positions in the industry. I totally believe that. So that's my answer. Is it the filmmaker's responsibility to find and develop your audience? I'm just going to start singing these questions now. Why do you feel that way? Yeah, I definitely... I don't think it's your job to find and develop your audience. I think it's your job when you write a script. You don't write a script for an audience. You write a script and then know what audience that caters to. And then you target that audience. Why is this important? Because it is of utmost importance for you to ensure that your investors make their money back. That's why. You cannot make films without money. Unless you're going to walk around a camera and just shoot people in the street. And even then, you'd need them to sign releases. So that's really the only reason why it's important. Making your investors' money back. It's also important, once you know your audience, you know the target demographic, finding clever hacks of how to widen that net. So maybe your script initially only appeals to people of color, 18 to 24, male. And you say, well, this could be a really strong film for the Asian community as well. How do we bring them into this film wanting to watch it? And you say, well, listen, a couple of these characters, do they have to be white or do they have to be black? No. Why don't we make a couple of the characters, I don't know, let's hire this actor who's Chinese, who's really popular in China. Let's hire this actor who's Japanese, who's really popular in Japan, who'd be great for the part. Or we'd make them great for the part. And in that way, you're diversifying your casting, right? Avoid stereotypes also, everybody. Please, don't cast stereotypes. But you're diversifying your casting and you're widening your target demographic. I mean, that's meeting the best of two worlds. Diversification, hugely important. And also, it is, at least mitigating some of the risk of your investors not making their money back, because you're saying we're diversifying the amount of people coming in to watch this movie. So we're diversifying where we're planning to get the return on investment from. What role have film festivals played in your life so far? Why are they necessary? How do you get the most out of them? Okay, I'll stop after that. Film festivals are necessary, right? Because, like everybody knows, traditionally, film festivals were the only place that you could actually see films many, 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 many years ago. And they would determine by some hand-picked tastemakers of what films also got potentially a theatrical release. This was the case because watching films and media was not consumer convenient. Now it's so consumer convenient, the need for film festivals and distribution companies might be shrinking pretty quickly. Right? Why pay so much money to go to a film festival, or even to spend on an application to a film festival that might reject you, when you could just pump money into social media marketing and marketing the film yourself? It's a big question a lot of distribution companies and film festivals are going to have to answer really soon. It's going to be the need. I love film festivals, but I'm talking about realities. Right? Realities. Okay. And obviously with a film festival, it gives you cred, right? That's a big thing. The illusion of cred, right? Well, I got into Cannes, so now this means something, right? But does it? Can you name for me who won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1960? Most of you probably can't, and that's okay. But you can tell me what the movie Back to the Future is about. Back to the Future didn't go to Cannes. That's the point, right? Stanley Kubrick, another one. I don't think Stanley Kubrick ever won an Oscar. Maybe got nominated or won for one of his films for Best Special Effects, which might have been 2001: Space Odyssey. Didn't win an Oscar. What was more important, that he made great films and that you know those films? Or that he won an Oscar? It's the same thing with the film festival question. Film festivals are just there to give you exposure so you can meet more investors and make more movies. That's all it is. Do you need a film festival to do that for you? Not necessarily. It's all about money. I am a big believer in the importance of social media in many aspects of the film process. Are you on social media and do you use it in your work? Why or why not? Well, I'm very happy that you're a big believer in social media, and maybe I could hire you to do mine, because I can't stand social media whatsoever. I am on it, but am not at all. I have an Instagram, Dodge Cine, I believe, and I use it solely to post up photography. But even that becomes just irritating, right? I think most people who are ambitious and making their way, I think most people avoid social media and they hire people to do their social media. They hire people to do their Twitter shouts. Because most people I know don't even have time to be on social media. I have no time to be on social media. I'm too busy in the industry to actually be there on social media. And I also think social media is like a really negative place. It's a place where people cut each other down. People become insecure because they're comparing themselves to this illusion of another person's success. They're I don't think it's called a style reel, but it's called like a highlight reel, right? I don't think there's anything to really gain that's productive from social media for me, with the exception of marketing. But you hire somebody to do that. We have people to do that for us, for our upcoming projects, for the ones that are in post. I just have no interest. I do think it's important for marketing though. I do, because so many other people are on it. Me, I usually have my face in a book, or I'm watching soccer, or I'm playing chess, hanging out with friends. That's where my social media time would go. Relearning a language on Duolingo. I just think social media is a really negative place. People say things to each other that they would never dare say to somebody's face. And that's a problem. You know, I think it takes away from people actually having human interactions. When I got started, there were two screens, the movie screen and the television screen. Now there are also computers, tablets, and phones. Screens are everywhere. The home, the bus stop, the elevator, the taxi cab. As a creator, how does this affect the stories you tell and how you tell them? Well, let me ask you a question. Could you imagine seeing Lawrence of Arabia on your TV screen? I have a 30-inch. Could you imagine watching Lawrence of Arabia on a 30-inch screen? Could you imagine watching it on a cell phone screen? It's not the way things were meant to be. Stuff like Lawrence of Arabia and other amazing films are about immersion and scale, right? Immersion and scale. You lose all that for the convenience of sitting at your home, and you also lose it with the convenience of being able to pause the movie, and you lose it with the convenience of being able to have the lights on or the lights off. When you go to a movie theater, it is telling you this is how you're supposed to watch this film. Lights off. The only illumination is coming from the dream. The dream is the only illumination, because it's all you should care about. I think with all these screens, I'm trying to avoid saying something negative here. I think with all these screens, we need to learn how to value what we watch on them, to give them our proper respect, to give them our time, to be in the moment, right? If we're in conversation with somebody, we should be in the moment. Not, oh yeah. Same thing with watching a movie. Pick and choose where your focus is going to be, and then don't allow yourself to be distracted by something else. Immerse yourself into the moment. That's my belief on that. And you're asking, how does this affect stories that I tell? Well, like I said, we just shot a film in 239. It's like an epic. It is an epic. And we have these sprawling wide shots, landscape shots, with small little itty bitty actors in the frame. That's going to be really interesting for people to watch on their smartphone. You know, I would ask everyone, please watch it on a TV that is at least 30 inches, you know? And if you can't, that's okay. I'll take however you want to watch the film, however you're able. But just know, bigger sometimes is better. Yeah. there was one or more things you think would make the film industry better, what would it be? Just the stuff I've said before. You know, technical prowess, but also artistic prowess. You know, not celebrating mediocrity. Really nurturing people to embrace education post-college. I would also say shrinking the pay gap is huge. People below the line are not being paid properly. You know, you have these huge films that are multi-million-dollar films. You have producers and directors pocketing wads and wads of cash. And then you have below-the-line people who are struggling just to get paid their union minimums. I plan on changing that 100%. That has to change, because I think if we change that, I know if we change that, our quality of films will change as well. When people feel financially appreciated for what they do, and they feel like, wow, working as a grip, working as a first AC, I can still have an amazing life. I can still put my kids through college. That changes dynamics. Do filmmakers have any responsibility to culture? Do you feel that being a creative person requires that you give back or tell a particular story? Why or why not? Well, I definitely am a firm believer in write what you don't know. And you might go, what? Right. So write what you don't know means that I prefer engaging in scripts and in films about subject matter I don't know about. I find that to be what's enriching for me, is exploring and being educated while I'm creating something. Writing what I know is boring to me. Why do I want to write about something I've gone through? I mean, yeah, it's cathartic, but I don't create for catharsis necessarily. I create for curiosity and for understanding, and then also for entertainment for others and myself, I guess. I don't know if I ever say I get entertained by what I write. It holds my attention, but it's not like, it's like saying, are you entertained by your marriage? Entertained isn't the right word. It's something else. Fulfilled, moved, completed, understood. I've even now forgotten what the original question was. Do we have any responsibility to culture? Absolutely. If you are writing about a different culture, you, first of all, need to hire enough people, or as many as you can possibly find of that culture, to help guide your story, to be honest. And there are times where you can do your best, and if you're in a particular area, it might not be easy to find a lot of people from that culture. Maybe you only get one, right? But it's important that you try, and it's important that you run your stories by other people from that culture and get their permission and get their take and get their criticism, get their whatever. In our scenario, Mind the Art Entertainment and the producers at Mind the Art Entertainment did a really huge thing by saying that 50% of the proceeds from Wretched Earth were going to go to help the Black community. That was one of the most inspiring moments of Mind the Art Entertainment, and one of my proudest moments to be alongside them. So yes, we do have a responsibility to culture in that way, and we do have a responsibility also how we represent a culture in film. We absolutely do. I don't think being a creative person requires that you tell a particular story. You tell the stories you want to tell. Just keep them honest and ask permission. That's what I'd say. Understand you're a guest at the table. You eat what you're served. What inspired this story/film? Well, if we're talking about Broken Crayons, it was really about was really about the dynamic of children who are without parents in an adult world. Children who are without parents in an adult world, or children who all the adults in their life have faltered. And about children's resilience, but also about what us as adults, the kind of little adults we are breeding. And kind of the horror of it to me, the tragedy of it, and also maybe the hope. I never end films with closure. I end films with closure of the narrative, but I end them always with questions. I want the audience to have questions. And in part, it's because when that last frame is done, when that last credit is rolled and we're on that little bit of black for a couple moments longer, I want the audience to feel like these characters are still living. They're living behind that black. They're living behind the credits. They're living, and what are they doing? What's their life? I often wonder if Ashley's okay. I wonder if her mom ever came back for her. And I wonder about Sean. I wonder if Bobby's learned to tie his shoes yet, if his asthma's under control. They're friends. They're friends. Even some of my worst characters that I've written, worst meaning the ones that you might feel are the most flawed, I still feel bad for them. Miss Bolgard. I feel bad for her. She's someone who must have a lot of pain. So that's what inspired Broken Crayons, you know? Those stories. Where did you find your cast? Craigslist or Mandy. I think we also sent out some flyers to some middle schools to see if the drama clubs had any good actors. And then we auditioned the kids at LaSalle Academy. Miss Saros, my film teacher, was kind enough to allow us to use LaSalle Academy to audition. And they were great. It was magical. What is your next project? Lord, there are so many. There are so many. I'm in post-production for Wretched Earth, which I directed last year. I'm in post-production for And That's That, which I directed last year. We have various feature films in the financing stage of mine. Probably 3 of mine are in the financing stage. 1 of mine is in the writing stage. We have 2 TV pilots. 1 is in-house. No, we have 3 TV pilots. 2 are in-house. 1 is from an outside writer who's phenomenal. We have... I'm trying to think of what else. We have a documentary. I'm also a co-founder of an upcoming distribution company and exhibition platform, which is funny based on what I said about distribution companies before, but our distribution company is a little bit different. And so is our exhibition platform, and that's gaining traction. Yeah, I also work as an editor and a colorist, so the film you see behind me, I'm at Picture Lock for, about to enter color. I work as an acting coach. I mean, I got a lot, but it's all good stuff. Any unique issues encountered, and if so, your creative solution? On Broken Crayons, it was all unique issues. But no, nothing, you know, I will say one thing, getting on set and having equipment malfunctions the first day and then having 600 storyboards that we just kind of threw out and went, okay, here we go. Being able to do that much storyboarding and then also being able to do that much storyboarding and then being able to come on set, and because the pre-production was so well done, being able to just improvise, that was unique, and it worked. And I do want to say that coming up as one of the last generations to shoot on film and to edit on film really helped us be a cut above the rest. The film was shot with Brendan Ugama, CSC, who also lensed the Child's Play movie from Netflix that was in theaters, and lensed Adventures of Sabrina that was also on Netflix. We all came up on film. We shot on film. We edited, well, we didn't edit this on that, but I learned editing on a Moviola, which is celluloid, right? And then we learned how to edit on a flatbed, syncing celluloid and sound together. And when we were shooting on film, we didn't have money for a video tap. You know, we didn't have a zebra to guide focus. And I still think those aren't as good as using tape measure. Tape focus, trusting the math of the lens. We did that. The DP had to understand my shot framing so well as I would describe it, and would have to nail it because there was no monitor for me to look into. We only had 12 minutes per mag, and that teaches you something. When you couldn't go back and erase. What's on that celluloid is permanent, so you had to be absolutely certain. Absolutely certain, and you had to get those performances in a minimum amount of time. You know, in a small amount of time. It's different with digital. It's not the same pressure. And also, I actually still have, let me just show you. This was my editing tape and my editing pencil, which we would mark celluloid with from college. Still have it in my library post-production office, as you see here. And then this is an unopened can of 16 millimeter from Kodak. It's 500T. This was Vision 3 stock. It was brand new when we used it on Broken Crayons, and this was specifically for interiors. And I kept it. Let's see. Anyone you would like to acknowledge, to thank from this project? I mean, everybody, man. Christian DeGray, Mind the Art Entertainment, who I still work with, we still work with, we're still doing huge things. That was a company I co-founded when I was 24 with him and like 4 other people, and it blew up into being like 600 plus internationally affiliated. Actually, no, I co-founded it when I was 21, 22, and it blew up into being 600 plus internationally affiliated by 24. And they've done huge things. We've had stuff at Broadway venues. They've done stuff at the Public. We hosted the pre-reception of Drama Desk Awards at Lincoln Center. Christian DeGray is a visionary. And recently was also the financier, one of the financiers behind Wretched Earth and That's That. So I'd like to thank him for all the years of work, because he also produced Broken Crayons. He's phenomenal. Brendan Ugama from Broken Crayons, Hunter McGonigal, Anthony Gonzalez, Beth Campbell. It's so funny to look back at that film. It's heartwarming for me. Everybody was so great. What do you look for in a script? I just look for somebody pouring their heart out in a script. Yes, there are all different techniques for good writing, but if nothing else, what do I look for in a good script is the person writing feeling what they're writing? Did they revise this, or did they just throw it on paper? Throwing it on paper can also be good, but are you feeling what you're throwing on paper? You know, don't just write for the sake of, well, this looks cool. Like, write from here, from the heart. That's what I look for. How do you select a director? Well, often I don't, because I am the director. But if I was to select a director, it would be somebody with all the personality traits that I said. And one director who I think is amazing, who I'm working with now I'm working as an editor and colorist for this director, is Joe G. Lombardo. He's out of Boston. He has a film coming up called Dreams of Rico that I'm editing right now. He's amazing. unique, profound, very literate, loves literature. We talk about literature for hours. He's a big Dostoevsky fan. And he really feels deeply what he writes. And he's probably one of the most inspiring filmmakers I've come across in years. It's excellent. Alex Etsayatse is another one. He's out of Los Angeles. He won one of Spike Lee's grants. He's an amazing filmmaker. He's another one that I really, really like. Yeah. What checks and balances do you make when managing budgets? Well, I have done budgets, and I do them pretty frequently. You have to buffer each department, even if you have a 12% contingency at the end. Some people drop down to a 10% contingency, which is the lowest you can go, but you have to have a contingency. Buffering each department on top of that contingency is important because you have no idea what issues are going to come up. You have no idea which departments might charge you way more than what you originally thought, and you can't find a better deal. So I would say that's the checks and balances system. And I would say a director should never do their own budget. Ever. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. That's like orange juice and toothpaste, right? Orange juice and toothpaste equals death. Director doing their own budget equals like world annihilation, the annihilation of the universe. Okay, worse than death. Director should never do it. You need somebody who's cold, unemotional to do that budget and to tell the director no. And this is a director saying that. Luckily, I have a good line producer who likes to do that all the time. Have you ever had to handle a difficult conflict in your career? Yeah. I would say the way to handle difficult conflicts on set is that if a conflict arises, you have to remove the conflict from set and from public immediately. You try to have an AD or somebody resolve it in private, or yourself if it's that serious. If it cannot be resolved in private and then people can do their job till the end of the day and then you really resolve it. If it can't be done and somebody needs to be fired, then you fire a person in private, and you should have, per department and per person, 1 or 2 people to call as backups in case you have to fire somebody. There needs to be plans made for that. Because the crew needs to take you seriously and know, look, your job is not assured. You have to be on your best behavior and at the top of your game. And B, it also keeps the director in the same vein and the producers from being almost kind of held at gunpoint by the crew, knowing that the production team doesn't have anybody else. This is also why it's really important, and this is going to sound kind of messed up. Why is it that you'll hear producers and directors not want a single person to do multiple referrals for crew on set? Well, the reason is mutiny-izing. If you have a crew member referring multiple people in different departments on set, if that crew member gets upset, it's very easy to rally his people or her people together and to kind of mutinize or all leave, and that affects all the different departments. That's why we usually say 1 referral per person. If you have a DP that wants to bring on their whole camera department, it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. And in part, it's for that reason. What would you change in a movie you produce that you believe would make it better? I really wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything. Every movie I've done, I've always done the best that I could. I wouldn't change anything. I think the only thing I might change is just enjoying the process more. Not worrying so much. Have fun. Don't worry so much. That's about it. Anyway, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have been able to interview, give a great interview for Louisiana Film Channel and talk a bit about myself. And I guess I'll see you at the movies. I hope you enjoy what I have created for you. Thank you.